happy everyone could join us today for Digging Deeper on May 1st, the start of Older Americans Month, in case you didn't know. And we had a great conversation on Thursday with Dr. Justin Golub, and he talked about hearing loss and cognitive impairment, the relationship to cognitive impairment, and as well as there were lots of personal questions about hearing loss issues and devices. Today, we're lucky to have with us Shari Eberts, and Shari is going to give us a little different perspective. She, through the auspices of Deb Pierce, who's going to lead the discussion today, she came to us. Shari is a hearing health advocate, and she's the author of a book, as you probably all read, Hear and Beyond, Live Skillfully with Hearing Loss, which she has done for 25 plus years. And she's going to talk a little about the skills that enhance life with hearing loss and probably defray some of the anxieties that may have been raised on Thursday. And as everyone knows, Deb is a fine architect who has had an extensive career that bridged from originally doing all sorts of big public projects to renovations to accommodate for living as people age. And so we're going to let Deb lead this, but thank you very much to Shari for joining us today. And I'll let you take it away, Deb, and figure out how we run this today.
Thank you. Well, I came upon Shari through a mutual friend and client of mine, Peg Ellertson, who is on the board of Hearing Loss Association of America. And Shari and Peg do seminars all over the country and are really wonderful advocates for how to live with hearing loss. Peggy was someone who I did some work for, and I really understood through our friendship and as her architect that for me as a person without hearing loss, dealing with her requires a different kind of skill set and sensitivity than I think people generally have. And so I think that this is a really great compliment to Dr. Golub's presentation on Thursday. And the way we'd like to handle today's get together is by dividing our hour into 4 segments. And the first will be dealing with people who have hearing loss. What do you need to know about managing yourself? What do you need to know about managing your relationship with other people? What kind of day-to-day coping strategies and behaviors may make a difference? The second 15 minutes will be looking at the people that we come into contact with. So how does a person without hearing loss relate to someone with hearing loss? What do we need to know in order to be a good friend, partner, collaborator, associate? The third will be about trends. What does she see coming down the pike in terms of software, apps, new developments? And the fourth will be anything else we want to talk about. So I think that format will allow us to really dig deep into each of these topics and keep from kind of getting too scattered and really look at these particular issues, which are Shari's particular specialty, living well with hearing loss. So Shari, regarding the first question, what would you like to say? What would you like, as a person with hearing loss, what would you like people to know? And how do you recommend that your experience help other people learn to live well with their hearing loss condition?
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for that question. And it's nice to meet all of you. I'm really happy to be here with you. And May is actually also Better Hearing and Speech Month. So it's, like there's many, and I think this is actually Deaf Awareness Week as well. Although I would say that This is more a discussion of people with hearing loss rather than people who are deaf and use sign language. So like Bruce said, I've been living with hearing loss for many, many years now. And what I would really like to talk about is how hearing loss is not just a medical issue, right? It's obviously something that is happening in our bodies, but it's also an emotional issue. It's a psychological issue. It's all of these things that we have to cope with and deal with in order to live well. It's really a multifaceted disability. And many of us don't even like to use that word disability, right? Because it sounds like such a serious thing, but hearing loss really does impact all aspects of life. And Bruce was talking about the book that I co-wrote with another advocate, Gail Hannon, who is based out of Canada. And the name of the book is Here and Beyond, Live Skillfully with Hearing Loss. And skillfully was a word that we chose very much on purpose because we think that a skill is something you can learn and it's something you can get better at. And we think there are lots of skills that will help people live better with hearing loss. And that's really our focus, sort of to help people deal with all of these things. So what I thought I would talk about in answer to this question is like, sort of what's that formula, right? What's the formula for living skillfully? And the first piece of that is understanding the big picture of hearing loss. So hearing loss is not something where it's a problem and you buy a solution and click, you turn it, and you're done. It's sort of more of a journey, right? It's something that changes over time. Most people have hearing loss that starts in their high pitches, if it's age related, and it can be progressive as well. So we really like to think about hearing loss as sort of this journey that you're going on. It's going to have ups, it's going to have downs. No one necessarily tells you that when you go to the audiologist. They say, here, buy a hearing aid and everything will be fine. And so my message is, yes, go get your hearing tested. Yes, go to the audiologist. You will probably need some type of technology device, but there's a lot more to it as well. And I think sometimes people go in thinking that hearing aids are like glasses and we're going to just put in our hearing aids and snap our fingers. And, you know, most of the time glasses really restore our hearing back to our vision back to normal. But for hearing aids and hearing, it's just not that way, unfortunately, yet. The technology is not there. So having that understanding, I think, prevents you from feeling like a failure, right? So if you go in and you think, oh, these hearing aids are supposed to solve all my problems, and then they don't, you're not going to have a positive attitude about continuing to work hard to communicate. And that's one of the things that we need to do in order to stay healthy, is to stay connected and communicating with the people we love and the activities that we love. So understanding that big picture, I think, is just a big, important way of setting yourself up for success. And then the second part of the formula is this three-legged stool of skills that we call it. And we really like that idea of a three-legged stool because I don't know if you've ever used a three-legged stool, but they do not wobble, you know, even when the ground is bumpy. And so we have not really figured out the physics of that, but we really like that imagery. And the three legs are technology, attitude change, which we call mind shifts, and then communication game changers, which are sort of non-technical skills for living well. And when we talk about technology, I'm sure that on Thursday you heard a lot about hearing aids and cochlear implants, maybe even. So that's sort of the primary technology that people think of. But there are so many other things, right? There's captioning, which I don't know if people have turned on here on Zoom. I have my captions turned on always when I have caption apps on my phone that I use whenever I'm in a difficult communication situation. There are remote microphones that sometimes come with different types of hearing aids, where if you're in a lecture type situation, you could ask the speaker to put the remote microphone just on their lapel, and then you're able to get that sound right into your hearing aid. So the technology is hugely important, but it's more than just the hearing aid. technology is advancing rapidly, and we'll talk about maybe some more of those things in part 3. But just so you understand, sort of as you're thinking of the 3 legs, technology is hearing aids plus. And then the second bit is mind shifts. And I started off sort of saying that hearing loss impacts you emotionally as well, right? It's something where, it can be embarrassing. You might feel like you were less than now than you were. It's harder to communicate. So you feel maybe that you need to isolate yourself. And there are many mind shifts that we include in this book. Sometimes people think, nobody understands what I'm going through. And we advise people to try and flip it on its head and say, there really are many people out there that are having the same challenges with hearing loss, and I can learn from them. I'm not alone. And I know when I realized I wasn't alone, it really helped me to feel a lot better about things and to find peers and others that I could learn from. So another, sort of attitude that's very common for people with hearing loss is, I don't want to advertise my hearing loss. People are going to think I'm old, or going to think I'm slow. And we really try to get people to understand that being open about our hearing loss is going to help communication be better. Trying to hide hearing loss leads to misunderstandings. And so it's these types of things where it takes some time, right? It takes some time to accept that, this is something we're going to need to deal with, but we can do it. And if we have these sort of more can-do attitudes, it creates opportunities for us to live more skillfully with it. And then the third leg of the stool is something that we call communication game changers. And so these are non-technical skills, sort of behavioral changes that you can use to communicate better. So speech reading or lip reading, obviously, is something that's important. So it's something that you can learn, or you can get better at, but unfortunately, I think it's 70% of speech is actually not visible on the lips. A lot of it is made sort of deep into the throat, but it is something that helps. And I think people with hearing loss are often using that. And people with, maybe don't think they have hearing loss are using that as well. We found that out during the pandemic when we were all wearing masks, how difficult it was for us to communicate. But other things, making sure that you get the right seat, right? Simple things like this. But if you're going to a restaurant, make sure, for me, it always works best if I have a wall behind me so that I don't have as much background noise. If there's a corner, I stick myself in the corner. If we're at if there's a choice of a booth, I always get a booth, because then you have something behind you that also is sound absorbing, right? If it's a soft surface, if there's a cushioning in that booth, that's going to absorb some of that extra background noise. So things like making sure that you, find the right seat, or that you are willing to ask for the things that you need. So we need to tell people about our hearing loss, right? That's sort of that mind shift of not hiding it, but being out front with it. But taking it a step further towards self-advocacy and asking for, what we need people to do, whether it's switch seats with us, whether it's make sure they're not covering their mouth while they're talking to us, or making sure they're not talking over each other if possible in a situation, and asking people, what we need from them, because for better or for worse, we do need things from them in order to communicate well. So that's sort of the third leg of that stool. And when they work together, I think it's really the magic, right? Because if you have a better attitude, you're more willing to use some of those behavioral things, right? Because you're more willing to speak up and ask someone to move seats with you, or to, wear that remote microphone. And so I think it helps you also use your technology more efficiently, because you're willing, again, to sort of take risks and try things and be a little bit more comfortable in your own skin. Also in the book, we talk a lot about hearing hacks, and I won't go through these now, but just in case that's like something of interest. when we started writing that, we were worried about the word hack, I guess, because it had a connotation of, someone who didn't know what they were doing. Now a hack is like a life skill, it's sort of like a sneaky way of solving a problem. Like, how do you, peel an orange, in one little long peel or whatever. So we have hearing hacks in there for all different situations. So if your clients or you yourself are going to the theater, or you're going to a restaurant, you're going on a hike, you're going boating, you're going traveling, all these different things we put together into the book, different ways of being prepared and different suggestions on how you might create a better communication situation in lots of different things that you or your clients would want to do. So I would suggest taking a look at that as well. And we can talk through some of that if you're interested. And then the last thing I would say here, because I definitely want it to be, sort of interactive, is the importance of peer support and just how you don't need to go through hearing loss alone. And please don't. I, for many, many years, I was highly stigmatized by it in my mid-20s when I started having trouble hearing. I had watched my father struggle with it as well. He was highly stigmatized. But once I finally met other people with hearing loss and I saw how well they were doing in life, they were all different, successful business people, teachers, advocates. It gave me hope that I could do it as well. And I just learned so much from them. So I would really encourage seeking out a group like HLAA, or even on Facebook. They have these Facebook groups where you can find and interact with people a little more anonymously. But we can learn so much from each other. And so I really encourage people to reach out in that way too.
Shari, I really like what you say about advocating and being overcoming the stigma, because when I have gone out with Peggy, she'll go up to a speaker and she'll say, I have hearing loss. I'm going to be paying a special attention. Is there anything that I need to know about coordinating with my apps or with my hearing? Do you have a microphone? Can you be sure to speak into it? So I think that seeing this as a journey where a little curiosity and boldness are important. People want to be helpful. I've seen also in groups that she asks people to make sure only one person is speaking at a time. And it can be very difficult, even with Zoom, because sometimes you don't know who's speaking. And so if there's a group of people at a table, it's, would people raise their hand when they're speaking, or let's have a talking stick or something like that. I think, you can almost make it into a game, but just getting over that sense of shame and stigma is a really big part of it, because then the solutions are really much more achievable.
100%. I agree with that 100%. And that's why we really talk very much about those mind shifts, sort of being able to get past that. And sometimes people say, well, like, okay, that sounds great, but like, how do you do it? Right? It's hard. And one of the suggestions that I have, it's sort of a couple of things, is just to think about trying to optimize something rather than perfect it. Right? They always say that perfection is the enemy of the good. And with hearing loss, that is super true because it's probably never going to be perfect, right? I am never going to be able to hear perfectly in really any situation. But that's okay. I can hear better. I can communicate better than I did a minute ago if I'm able to advocate and use some of these tools. So focus on like making it better rather than perfect.
Is there anyone in the group today who has anything to add about their own coping with hearing loss?
I have a question for Shari. What kind of hacks are you using now to hear everybody?
On this call?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I have everybody's picture up here. So I'm not using a speaker mode. I'm using a gallery mode, and I have everyone's picture sort of as big as I can, so I can do some of the lip reading, right? I mean, I've gotten very good at lip reading on Zoom. I'll tell you, I was not at the beginning. And I also have the auto captioning that is going. That's the first thing I do when I come on to any Zoom meeting. And thankfully it was set up here. Sometimes I go into Zoom meetings and it's not set up because Zoom makes it a little bit challenging. I think actually the first time that
it was you.
it wasn't
you
set
who
up.
made us aware.
Yeah. So I always try and do that in advance, actually, to sort of set up a good situation so that I'll walk in and I'll have that support. And I also have a very good speaker on my computer. So I'm using that, although some people would connect with Bluetooth to their hearing aids, and that would also help get the sound better, more directly into their ears. So a number of different things. My fail-safe, if you really want to know, is if the captions are not available on Zoom, then I have several speech-to-text apps on my phone that I can call up, that open up, and I would place that next to the screen and use that for captioning as well.
Great.
Sometimes there may be a delay between the written word on a screen and a person being able to hear it and process it. So if you ask a question, someone who is relying on reading the captioning, then expect a pause. And it doesn't mean that they haven't heard you or that they are refusing to answer. And I think for the person who has the hearing loss, it may be, I'm reading my captioning, so there'll be a slight pause each time that I respond. Just give me the time.
Well, and jokes too. I mean, if you tell a joke, and there's actually this organization in New York City that does a comedy club it's a hearing loss nonprofit. And so the comedians all come and they tell the joke, and then the punchline comes out on captions, and then everybody laughs. And it's very disconcerting for the comedian the first couple of times because they're like waiting for that immediate, laughter. But you're right, it does sometimes take time.
Paula,
Captions are fast sometimes too.
Paula?
Yeah, I wondered if you had any hacks or suggestions for dealing with background noise.
Background noise is just the killer thing for people with hearing loss, right? So some of it is to just try and minimize that background noise. So if you can pick the place that you're meeting, always pick the place. Be proactive. Suggest that you have the meeting in a quiet space. Sometimes I just invite people to my home because then I can control what the background noise is. I'm not going to have the music on or whatever. So if you can control it, great. If not, I would suggest if you're going out to a restaurant or another venue, see if you can check it out in advance and figure out where in that space do you think would be the best place, with the least background noise. Is there a place that's sort of in a corner? Is there a place where there are more soft surfaces that will absorb the sound rather than just reflecting it all around? If you're going to a restaurant, a lot of times eating outside is better because there's a lot more organic material that will absorb some of that sound as well. The other thing with background noise is trying to it's not exactly background noise, but it is a little bit. It's like trying to bring the sound more directly into your ears. So there are a number of tools like those remote mics that you can give to a speaker, but you can also give it to your dining companion, right? Here, put this mic on, and that way you can hear above all the clanking. But a lot of times with background noise, it's trying to find ways to use those behavioral changes to either move yourself or turn down the background noise or ask people to, speak directly at you. I always try and sit across from the person that is hardest for me to hear, because that way they're speaking right at me. And also I can use more of the lip reading cues. So I don't know if that's like a foolproof solution, but that's some
I think it's foolproof. My hearing loss is unilateral, so it's a little different. It depends on where the noise is coming from, but it's the biggest challenge is the background noise. It's filtering that out.
Absolutely. And that's what
I haven't been to a comedy club but once since I lost my hearing because it's impossible to catch the punchline.
Yeah. So theater is different though, right? Because theater, there are captioned performances.
Oh, I can just get a headset for theater. Almost every theater has a headset.
Yeah. And there's also captioned performances. So there's an organization called, at least in New York, called Theater Development Fund, or TDF. And you can sign up for their emails. They have open caption performances, you know, I'd say on a fairly regular basis, right? They're not all the time. There's also in theaters in New York and other big cities too, something called Gala Pro. So yes, you can get the headsets, but you can also use an app on your phone. It's called Gala Pro. And once you're 4 weeks into the run of the show, if it has that capability, you can pull that app up and it will give you captions on your phone along with the show. So
you're looking down at the captions rather than up at the show.
Well, usually for me, I'm lucky, I'll get probably 80-90% of it. And so I can watch the show. And then if I miss something, I look down,
For me, because I have good hearing in one ear, the headset usually works fine at a theater. But in situations where there isn't a headset or there's a lot of background noise, it's near impossible to make out what's going on. I describe it as like listening to being in a room with multiple radio stations simultaneously on different channels. For those of you who aren't hard of hearing and you can't separate the sounds out.
Shari, would you know whether there's a website that would have a list of places that are particularly easy to hear in, that are hearing loss friendly? Would there be something like that for a town? Like here are the restaurants, here are the theaters, here are the places that have good acoustics and good technology.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that. There is a website. It is called Soundprint, I think .com. It's also an app, and it's one of those crowdsourcing type apps. So they ask you anytime you go into a restaurant to take a sound print. And so you record the decibels in the app, what time of day, who you were there with. And it creates this picture for all these different restaurants and cafes. I don't think it has theaters on there, but it does have mostly eating venues. And it will tell you, it ranks them sort of, these are the quieter ones, these are the medium ones, these are the loud ones. So it can be pretty handy. It's actually international. There's in major cities across the US. So I would definitely check that out. It's called Soundprint.
That's great. I was actually thinking when you were saying that, it may be that I haven't read your book, but we'll look at it, but it may be in the back of the book, there's resources that we could put on to the Life Planning Network website or something for just resources. This is fantastic. Having the sound print sounds fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to share lots of resources. I would also say my blog, livingwithhearingloss.com. I've written about so many of these tips and tricks, so a lot of it's in the book, but every week we learn more that wouldn't even be in that book. So that's a good resource as well.
Would it be okay with you if we borrowed some of your blog posts and put them on LPN? And we'll give
absolutely. As long as you link back to the original, it's all copyrighted material, but as long as you share it with that, that's true. Okay. That's great.
So I just had one quick question going back to the acoustic issues in restaurants and other venues. You mentioned you should look for soft materials. Is that the principal thing that you would look for if you didn't have sound print to guide you? What would you look for?
I would look at the decor. So if it's all hard surfaces, glass and wood, you know that there's sound is just going to be bouncing off of all of that. If you see sound, like if you see there's cushions, is there, carpet, usually not carpet anymore, but is there acoustic tile? Are there tablecloths? Tablecloths absorb a lot of sound. So that's a really good way to choose a restaurant, just visually. Also, again, if you can eat outside, a lot of times that's quiet. You're not as jam-packed all together with the hard surfaces and everything. I always say, like, if you can find an old school, Italian restaurant, you're good to go, right?
In many ways.
And I would also say, actually, I think someone just put in the chat. Yes, also eat either early or maybe a little bit on the later side. Usually earlier is better. And if you get there early, maybe you can talk to the hostess or the host, the maitre d', and say, can you stick me in a quiet corner, and can you turn this speaker off? Right? I understand you want to have music playing around the restaurant. Can you turn this one off while I'm here? Sometimes they'll do it.
Other things you can look for is window coverings, if they're curtains, draperies that absorb sound, anything that's kind of muffling. Soft materials will do that. Parallel walls bounce sound around, and low ceilings do too. So if you're just looking at a place and seeing how noisy is it likely to be, how close is it to traffic, I think there's a lot that can be done visually just to narrow down the choices. Why don't we get to, and it may actually be kind of a continuation of this, would there be anything that you would say that people who are not with hearing loss themselves, but working with people, living with people who have hearing loss, any recommendations for what you wish other people knew?
Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you for that. I think the first thing is to sort of understand some of those myths that we're talking about, like the fact that hearing aids don't work like glasses. Because I think a lot of times people have unrealistic expectations for people with hearing loss, right? That you have your hearing aids on, like they'll say to, don't say to someone like, turn your hearing aids up, or are you wearing your hearing aids? Sometimes they're not, and maybe sometimes they need to be turned up, but most of the time people are trying as hard as they can. And so you need to understand that hearing aids are good tools, but they are not silver bullets. So please understand that. Also, if you're hosting an event and you want to provide accommodations, understand that most people with hearing loss do not know sign language. It's actually probably less than 5% of people with hearing issues are in the deaf community and use sign language. But sometimes if you're going to a medical facility, or, even like your work is putting on some kind of a party, and they say, oh, we're going to be accessible for people who can't hear, they will provide a sign language interpreter. And while that's really, really important for somebody who uses sign language, for the vast majority of people, that is not an accommodation. I would say also use universal technologies like looping, like captions. If you are hosting anything, a Zoom call, make sure that you have the captions on. Educate yourself about the tools that people with hearing loss use so that you can make them available and be a good ally. Also, this is basic stuff, but communication best practices. Make sure that you get a person's attention beforehand. So if someone comes up behind me and is talking to me, I probably won't even know that they've started talking to me. So by the time they get around to where I can see them, I've missed the whole beginning of whatever it is the topic is going to be. So it's best to just say, hey, Shari, you know what? I wanted to talk to you about this. And that way I can pay attention and I'm not playing catch up the whole time. Obviously, speak clearly, speak at a normal pace, and at a little bit of a louder volume, but not shouting. Shouting actually disrupts the facial speech reading cues because your mouth is looking all different. So if you're speaking really slowly, which sometimes people do, or shouting, it defeats the purpose. It's not going to help. I'd say be prepared to repeat things or rephrase things. Usually I like someone to try and repeat it first, because I probably heard like some of it and I'm just trying to fill in that blank word. But if that's not working, think of a different way to say something. Sometimes it's just a really challenging word. And then watch for comprehension, right? Like if someone is leaning in and scrunching up their face, they're probably not hearing you very well. And so you can change the way you're speaking. You could say, is there something I could do to help you hear that better? Are you following what I'm saying? That gives them the opportunity to sort of say, you know, it'd really be helpful if blah, 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 right? So they don't have to interrupt you. If you sort of say, you know, something like, are you getting that? Or is there something I could do to help? But sometimes I think that's a nice thing. And I would say also just to lead with kindness. So when you have hearing loss, communication is very exhausting, right? Like the way I liked Paula's description of the different radio stations, the way I describe it is like you're playing a game of Wheel of Fortune at all times, right? And so like some of the letters are filled in, some of the letters are blank, and we're trying to, you know, fit that all together using the speech reading, using context clues, using any piece of information that we can gather and trying to put that all together to make sense of what we're hearing. And so that takes a lot of mental energy. It can be exhausting. So please just lead with kindness. You know what I mean? If someone is tired and they need to go home, don't get upset. They probably just are at the point where they you know, need to take a break, or maybe encourage them. I always do this myself. If we're at big family parties, I'll just go in the other room for, you know, 5 or 10 minutes and just kind of sit there and like let myself rest a little bit. So be understanding if people are doing things like that. They're not being antisocial. They're not being rejecting. They're just trying to, you know, sort of survive the situation. And please avoid dismissive phrases like never mind or it's not important. So if someone does not catch what you're saying, you know, it was important enough to say the first time, please let them decide whether it was important or not. I know when people say that to me, it's so belittling, because it just shows that it's not even worth that extra energy to repeat the one sentence that you just said. I mean, it really can be very demoralizing for somebody with hearing loss.
No, I think hearing aids now have gotten so small and invisible that we often don't know whether someone has hearing loss or not. And I can think of several people that I know that kind of nod in a group meeting, and there's no way of knowing whether they are following or not. Do you think it's a good idea to keep saying, to repeat that, or, you know, did you hear that? What kind of language would you recommend using to kind of do this diplomatically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends on the person and how close you are to them. But you could even say something like, oh my God, it's so loud in here. Like, are you able to hear me? Because, you know, I'm having trouble in this environment, right? And then it takes the pressure off. It's not like, oh, look at you, you can't hear me. It's like a situational type of thing. And most of the time that is true, right? Or you could even say, oh, it's so loud in here. Like, oh, that looks quiet over there. Do you want to go sit over there? And so it's not necessarily pointing at them. I think if they're making like a real face where they're, you know, not, it's like obvious that they're really struggling, you can say to them, you know, is there anything that I can do to help communicate better with you? But I think if you can sort of use a more of an environmental thing, that always sort of takes some of the stigma away.
I think if we're speaking to a group, then it's important at the beginning to say, I wanted people to raise your hand if you can't hear, and I'll slow down, increase the volume. We want everyone here to be able to participate fully. So I think that kind of inclusiveness in a large group. And then I think in a smaller group too, we often need to keep being reminded, because we get excited about something, people then maybe speed up their talking. And so there's a little checking in more regularly, perhaps, or stepping back and saying, how am I doing on this?
Yeah. I think also, like, for a person with hearing loss, just if you can use like a nonverbal reminder, then you're not interrupting the flow and it's less disruptive. But like, you could, or you could just like anything, like if you and your family have some kind of clue, like, I didn't get that, repeat that. It saves time, right? Everybody knows what the situation is. I think in a large group, sometimes it's hard for people with hearing loss to sort of say, I can't hear, you know what I mean? So it's like, if I think it's nice to say, if you can't hear, please let me know. But if there's a way to do it that's not so public, right? Like maybe through the chat and the Zoom meeting, or again, like sort of a nonverbal thing. I remember I went to a reunion class at my university, and it was like a master class, right? The professor's up there talking, and I went up beforehand and I said, I might not be able to hear you. And he was struggling with the microphone. And he said, can people hear what I'm saying? And everyone in the audience was like, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. But I saw him remember. And he said, well, I saw a couple of hands out there, so he covered for me. So it's hard. I mean, if you can just have the accessibility, like put the captions on, have a hearing loop in place for people to just check, click to the T-coil setting. That's always better than having someone identify themselves. But, we got to do the best we can in each situation.
You've mentioned loop a few times, and I'm not sure everybody here is familiar with hearing loop technology. It's a way of wiring a building so that the sound from the microphone of the speaker goes directly into the T-coils of the hearing aids of the listeners. And not all buildings, very few actually, are looped, but the best locations, or I think are the more kind of common locations, may be houses of worship, and occasionally in perhaps a lecture hall or an educational space. So that can be something also by self-advocacy to find out whether a space is looped before going to a program, maybe a museum or a theater event or something like that. Again, if there were resources locally about what are the looped facilities, then that would make a difference in choosing where to go if there's some options.
Yeah, at least in New York City, the HLAA New York City chapter website has a list of looped theaters and other looped venues in the city. And I would imagine that other chapters have something similar for different areas. And a loop, a lot of times there are also loops like at the pharmacy. If you go to CVS and you see that it's like a big square thing with a T-coil and a symbol on it, you can go up and switch to your T-coil and speak to the pharmacist that way. You can install a loop in your living room with the TV inside of it. So it's just a wire that goes around the room, and then anything that's in that wire that uses a microphone, you can connect directly to your hearing aids.
When you're mentioning the pharmacy, you reminded me of a question. There are a few places where it's really critical to hear well, and the pharmacy, the doctor's office, the lawyer's office. And I think to the extent that we're interacting with those people, I think to bring in an advocate with yourself to make a point of alerting the ones you're dealing with that this is a situation. And it's especially important to be able to hear very clearly. If you get the diagnosis wrong or the medications wrong, then it's a very serious error. Shari, What do you see anything coming down the pike? Any developments that we want to be looking out for? Are there countries that are really good at hearing loss facilities, for example? If people are traveling, like, oh, don't go to that place, or please go here. They're great about it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say in terms of traveling, London is terrific. I mean, I think all the tube stations are looped. I don't even know if anybody speaks to someone in a tube station anymore, like a conductor or whatever, but they used to be looped way back when I used to go there. A lot of their theater performances are captioned. So London is wonderful. Europe always seems to be ahead in terms of accessibility versus the US, although I think that we are improving. I think one technology that's coming down the pike that's interesting to talk about is Bluetooth Auracast. So it's Bluetooth, but it's like this new kind of Bluetooth called Auracast, like an aura, and it isn't 100% developed yet. But when it is, it will be kind of like a hearing loop that should be installed pretty much everywhere. It's much cheaper than installing a loop, because a loop usually you need to renovate and rip up the carpet, and it's a whole big thing. This would just be, a sort of installing something on the wall. And what it would do would allow any Bluetooth device to connect into it. So you wouldn't need a T-coil. You could use your earbud, your AirPods. You could use any Bluetooth device to come in and connect. And if you went to the movies, it would go directly into your sound. If you went into a lecture hall, directly into your devices, hearing aids or not, right? Just any Bluetooth device. And I find that really, really exciting, because I think once it hits the mainstream, right, and people actually are doing that, people love to listen to their own personal sound, environment already. Once people without hearing loss are demanding that there's Auracast so that they can hear something better, it's going to benefit people with hearing loss in such a huge way. So I'm really excited about that, although it's probably not happening, in the next couple of years, but down the pike.
Yeah, I have a question. So one of the situations I find most challenging are announcements in public spaces.
Yes.
Have you any suggestions? I know if
the train is leaving in 5 minutes.
If your gate is changed, I probably won't hear that. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions about. I mean, I don't wear a hearing aid. It's not so useful for my hearing loss, but are there other suggestions you have for dealing with situations like that?
I think if you can, download the app for whatever you're traveling on, right? So like if you're taking the train, download the Amtrak app. If you are taking Delta Airlines, download the app, because a lot of the announcements are this flight's delayed, the gate is changed, those type of logistical things. And if you are logged in on the app and they know that you're on that flight, they send you text messages and they send you emails. And so
log in and stay logged in. Is that
yeah. Like if you put the different, I have it all on my phone that I get I get my boarding pass, on my phone. I don't print it out or anything. So if you do everything through the apps, they will alert you. They alerted me, to a gate change just yesterday, actually. And also when your boarding group is boarding. So it's pretty amazing the way that we can use technology to get around some of those announcement issues. And I always, if I feel like I'm not understanding what the announcements are from the gate, at an airport, let the attendants up there know that you have hearing loss and that they should alert you personally when it's your time to board. A lot of times they'll just let you go on the plane early, which is sometimes a nice benefit depending on who you're traveling with. So again, it's, sort of that self-advocacy and finding the tech tools.
There was a question in the chat, Shari, that I'd like to read off to you. Is there something you should look for in an audiologist? If you think someone is having issues, do you have a recommendation about how kindly you would suggest testing? And are there things people with hearing loss should consider doing to bolster their cognition? I guess that's a few questions.
Yeah, those are great questions. I mean, the audiologist is such an important partner in all of this. And so I would really try and get recommendations, if you can, from other people who are already using audiologists, maybe at a Hearing Loss Association of America chapter meeting, or even just in their Facebook group. Like, does anyone have a good audiologist? This is my type of hearing loss or something. Because you're looking for someone who is not just trying to sell you the hearing aid, right? Because as we talked about in the beginning, the hearing aid is a critical part, but there are so many other parts as well. And so you want to find someone who's really going to partner with you on some of those other skills as well. I think it's also important that it's a person that you have some level of rapport with, some level of trust with, because it is, you're going to be telling them about personal things in your life. This is where I'm having trouble. This is where I'm struggling. And so it has to be someone that you feel comfortable interacting with in that way. I'd say make sure it's somebody who communicates well. A lot of audiologists, you'd be surprised, are, turning to the side while they're telling me all about my hearing aids. I'm like, no, don't you know? Face me. So things like that. And then, of course, anytime you buy a hearing aid, you are able to try it out. So if they are pushing you, if they are not explaining all the financial details in writing, if they are not giving you at least a 30-day trial with the ability to return, sometimes there's a small restocking fee, then just find someone else, because you need to have someone who is going to be reputable and treating you fairly that way.
And wouldn't it be true that if the adjustment doesn't work, that doesn't mean to give up on the audiologist, but to just continue to advocate for yourself and say, can you make this better?
100%. So it's more of, it's almost always not going to work the first time, right? That it's going to be an ongoing relationship with your audiologist. That's why it has to be someone that you feel comfortable interacting with, because there will be multiple adjustments over time. And then there's a second question about cognition, how to bolster your cognition. I think treating the hearing loss, right? Doing things to keep yourself engaged with life. I know there was sort of a lot of discussion about that, I guess, at on Thursday. And, hearing loss can lead to isolation because it is exhausting, because it's harder to communicate. So we have to force ourselves to stay engaged. The way to protect cognition in general, right, is to interact with others, to stay engaged in activities that you love. And just because we have hearing loss doesn't mean that we can't do any of those things. We can. So it's sort of like use it or lose it. And so it's really important to take steps to use technology, use the mind shifts, use the communication behaviors that we've been talking about, and get the other people in your life to be your hearing buddies. Have them help you out with it, because it really takes two, at least two, for good communication.
I've actually heard a statistic and I think it's either 17 or 25% of the population has hearing loss and doesn't wear. Maybe the numbers are wrong. A lot of people don't wear hearing aids, so we should probably assume that everyone has hearing loss.
Yeah, 75% to 80% of people with hearing loss go untreated.
That's correct. Which is crazy. I mean, but I get it. I was stigmatized. I didn't do anything till I really had to. And everyone, not everyone, but most people who say that they finally, once they finally do it, they say, I wish I had done this 5 years ago. What all that wasted time.
So we're close to the end. Does anybody have any last minute shares or questions?
Just wanted to ask about the OTC hearing aids that just came out last year. Obviously, you don't have as much contact with an audiologist that way, but I'm wondering if that's a way we should consider if we're planning to buy a hearing aid sometime soon.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, I think so. I mean, a lot of it depends on your hearing loss. So I would suggest that you get a hearing test, right? So you know sort of where your hearing level is. The OTC hearing aids are geared towards adults with mild to moderate hearing loss. And so how do you know what that is, right? There's actually, you can get the hearing tested and you can see that. You can do the test online in apps as well. So you don't need to necessarily go to an audiologist for that, although that's wonderful to do. Excuse me. And then I think if depending on where your hearing loss is, if it's really just situational issues, then an OTC hearing aid might be something that would work. It's not going to work for somebody who has a severe hearing loss, a very complicated hearing loss where you really need a lot of individual attention. If it's sort of like, a reading glasses type hearing loss, if there is such a thing, an OTC device might be helpful. So I think it's definitely something to consider, but it is not right for everyone. It's definitely lower cost, but you also, need to be a person that is comfortable with technology and figuring things out on your own, because you do not have that person that you can go to troubleshoot everything for you.
If you had OTC hearing device, would it be something you would want to wear all the time, or does it make sense to put it in where it's sometimes and not others?
I think it really depends on your particular situation. Now, the rule of thumb is that you should always be wearing your hearing aids all the time, right? Because that's how your brain finally gets used to it, right? You have to train your brain to hear. I'm sure the doctor talked about that on Thursday. It's like you hear with your brain, really, not with your ears. But I think if you have, this is a personal opinion, right? I think if you have a mild hearing loss and honestly, you're really functioning quite well, except when you go into a particular situation and the alternative is nothing, I would say 100% use the over-the-counter hearing aid to keep that stimulation and to keep you enjoying that activity. Why not? And then if it gets worse, you can always move on to something else.
Fantastic. But what a great gift this was. I thought just awesome answers all the way through and really useful. Thank you very much, Deb, for bringing Shari, and Shari, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. And
session. Thank you.
Great information. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And so definitely check out my website, livingwithhearingloss.com, because there's lots of information, and the book as well. Like if you, not to be self-promotional, but like if you're interested in these topics, there is a lot of information here and beyond.com. You can learn more. HEAR.
well, we will post this
You're
on our website with the book, and we may steal a blog or two, but we'll be sure to link it back to you. And this just been terrific, incredibly valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, everybody.
Take care.